What's good, everyone? My name is Jacob Moses, and welcome to another episode of the Not Boring Tech Writer, where in each episode we focus on a different skill that you can learn to enhance your skill set, improve your marketability, diversify your career, and ultimately break the stereotype that technical writing is a boring career. This episode's skill: mentoring prospective tech writers. All tech writers can look back on their career and likely think of a specific person or two who helped them advance their career to where it is today. It could be a former professor who encouraged you to take technical writing courses, a friend who introduced you to the field, or a boss who invested time into your work. For prospective tech writers, these mentors are essential to professional development and landing that first sweet tech writing job, because they take the time to understand the mentees' hopes, dreams, and struggles, and come alongside to help them throughout the process. That's why in this episode, I have John Paz on the podcast, senior content designer at Atlassian and mentoring wizard, who's helped several current and prospective tech writers navigate the field and make the most of their skill sets. In this episode, John shares his experiences as a mentor to prospective tech writers and how you can do the same, including how to find prospective mentees, how to foster a relationship with mentees, and how mentoring can boost your own tech writing career. Big shout out to Knowledge Owl, a wonderful knowledge-based software product for sponsoring the Not Boring Tech Writer, and I hope you all enjoy this episode. John, what's going on, friend? How are you today?
I'm great, Jacob. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, thank you. How's life in San Francisco?
Oh, the weather is beautiful. I was in Austin last week and they had triple digits almost every day, and I'm glad to be back in the Bay.
Man, it is hot in Texas. I'm based in Denton, just about 3 hours from Austin. And you're right, man. We've been packing triple-digit heat for a couple weeks now.
Yeah, and there's no relief in the evening either.
No, we got nothing. Got nothing. Well, John, so happy to have you on the podcast today. We have a great skill to cover together, and that is mentoring prospective tech writers. And John, I'm really excited about this one. I know when I think back on my career, mentors were essential to any form of success I've had in my short career, whether it was, finding out about tech writing once I was in the industry, finding out about different kinds of tools, how to best use them. Mentorship is huge, and really excited to hear the insights that you have to share with us today.
Oh yeah, it's a topic I feel very passionately about, and have begun taking a much more active role in trying to recruit mentees and try to become a more established mentor.
Awesome, John. I look forward to digging into it. To get us started, tell us a little bit about your work and what first got you into technical writing.
Oh, fantastic. It's a topic I love to talk about. So I'm one of the few people who is working in the field that they got their degree in, their undergraduate degree in. So I have an undergraduate degree in English with a focus in technical writing from the University of Central Florida. And so I spent the last 2 years of my degree taking all my specialty classes in technical writing. So it was a fun topic to pick, but obviously was not my first. I don't think that most people grow up wanting to be a technical writer. It's kind of something that fills a pretty basic need in that writers want to make money, and so as a creative writer, there's some suffering that you have to go through in order to really be known and to be paid and to kind of be established. And I didn't really have time to be a starving artist. So the goal was to use my writing to make money, and tech writing seemed like the biggest reward without having to completely change who I was.
So going back to university, you were already familiar with technical writing.
Oh, absolutely. And my tech writing professors were wonderful in helping me prepare, not least of which was that they kind of forced us through an assignment to have our resume online. And through that, I actually got my first tech writing job like a year before I graduated. So I was already working in the field while still learning. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And John, like you, I got a bachelor's degree in technical writing. They called it technical communication here at the University of North Texas and UNT. And it was huge. I mean, at that point, I think it was only 5 years old. We had just had our first bachelor graduate the year prior to. But it was excellent to learn about this wonderful field early on in university and get some of that mentorship from my professors. I want to talk a little bit about, so how long have you been a practicing technical writer now?
Right. So I think this is my 13th year
13th
officially,
year. Yeah,
and I'm only 35. So I'm always
that's
surprised
amazing.
at that number personally. But there's I call it there's the pre-software and post-software tech writing John. So the first 5 years of my writing career, I spent doing kind of more traditional technical writing roles, PDFs, Word documents, XML. Working for defense contractors. I did couple stints at Lockheed Martin, Siemens Power Generation, and kind of the more traditional technical writing. And then a company called Pentaho gave me a shot. It's a big data and data integration, data warehousing company, super high techy stuff. And it was a bit of a leap for me. I actually had it was a very steep learning curve, but that was my first taste of kind of the true software technical writing that I do today, which is a little bit of UX writing, a little bit of developer documentation, and a whole lot of just software-based technical writing. And that's where I found my home. And that's where I
Yeah.
felt like that wasn't just the best use of my skills, it was also the most lucrative. And it's bared out many times over since then. And that's one of the things that I find that most people need help with early in their tech writing career exploration is understanding the different types of tech writing out there and which one will tickle your fancy and get you the kind of money that you're after.
Yeah, John, you're exactly right. I mean, I think back to my formal education in TechCom. I think we had a class on high tech industries, a class on grants and proposals.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little bit of web design work, but really all these different fields thrown at you. And like you said, all with very different pay grades, different kinds of
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. And it can be challenging to navigate all of those opportunities, especially as a recent graduate. And I imagine more so even those first few years into TechCom where you're maybe getting comfortable in just one particular facet of TechCom. I'd love to hear from you, John. You've been in tech writing for about 13 years now, done various types of technical communication. What was it about this field that inspired you to get into mentoring others?
Oh man, I have a very specific moment where tech writing became my future career, and I started targeting it. And it was so my mom's a professor, and she's an English professor, and she's an English professor at my alma mater at UCF. So while I was going through the English department, I was taking naps in her office, and I was a very familiar face amongst the English professors, and I'd actually known a lot of them even before I started college because they come to my house for dinner. So I had a lot of them kind of pulling me in different directions. The lit professors pulling me in that direction, creative writing professors pulling me in another. But the one directly next door to my mother's office was a tech writing professor. And it was one day in between classes, I noticed he had a flyer on his door saying, you're a tech writer if, a kind of riff on the Jeff Foxworthy bit where you're a redneck if. And I had,
Uh-huh.
I had a bunch of things, where you're a tech writer if. And I forget the details, but a couple of things that stuck out to me was one, bulleted list entice you.
Uh-huh.
Two, you find yourself rewriting poorly written instructions for free. And three is that people always ask you to explain things to them that seem trivial to you. And right away, it kind of
Mm,
clicked for me, helped inspire me to take that intro to tech writing course. And my wife and I were high school sweethearts and had kids very early in life.
fun.
And so we were raising three kids. I was working full time at a roofing company and going to school full
Yeah.
time. So I was half asleep in my intro to tech writing course, and I still managed to pull off. And so that was to me the kind of the light bulb that showed me that this is something I can make a career out of, if only because it takes very little effort for me to do for what a lot of people they can't seem to do, which is just explain things clearly and concisely. So it seemed like it was a no brainer.
So, John, you had this great passion for the field, and I imagine right away you picked it up pretty easily. I imagine you did some great work these past 13 years. When did you take this shift into mentoring others? Of course, you have this great story about why people should pursue it, whether that's, it's a lucrative field, you can mess with a lot of really cool technology. when did you take this shift into mentoring others to pursue TechCom?
That's a great story as well. Mostly because tech writing was kind of feels like a means to an end until I started working for Atlassian, where Atlassian kind of inspired me to think about what the next stage of my career would be. And there's a lot of reasons for that, not least of which is that I really identify with my company's mission, and I get to work on some really fun and interesting things, and also the kind of the invention and adoption of UX writing as its own kind of trade, kind of led me to believe I have a longer future than the kind of means to an end, which might have been my inspiration originally. And so I started thinking about whether I wanted to go the principal contributor route or the manager route. At Atlassian, we have essentially two tracks for people who are already senior level contributors. So I kind of had to pick a path. Funny story that my team kind of got pilfered for resources at one point, and so I found myself with more work to do than people to do it. And I complained so loudly they gave my team a contractor, and this contractor ended up being a really good friend of mine now. But I kind of had to take on a very direct mentoring role and management role in managing his workload and making sure his time was protected. And kind of, for all intents and purposes, I was this guy's manager, my friend Colin.
Yeah.
And so him and I worked so well together, and everybody felt so highly of Colin that and Colin was great at being my champion as well. And that people started thinking about me as management material. And so I started looking at what the requirements were, and I wanted to get some experience in helping people grow.
Yeah.
And so I found out, how do I do that without, it's that catch-22. It's like, how do you demonstrate proficiency in something when you don't really, it's not your role. You want to grow into it. And so mentoring was one of this kind of an easy solution for this. But it was hard. It's not easy to find people to mentor. You kind of, especially if you're not very well known, or you don't really have a lot of technical writers at the junior level, which we don't have a ton of those in Atlassian. So at a Write the Docs meetup, I ran into a person who became my first mentee, a woman by the name of Deborah, and she was super ambitious, but she was in journalism and was looking to break into technical writing. And I had all kinds of thoughts and opinions on this, and I just had this mentoring relationship conversation with my boss, and so it was like this perfect confluence of opportunity. So someone presented themselves who could use the advice, and I was looking for someone to give advice to. So it started growing organically from there. And Deborah's very patient. She understands that I'm kind of learning along the way. And so we're patient with each other, and it's been a great relationship. And she's since, taken the plunge and left her job as an established newspaper to go venture into the world of technical writing. Awesome. And so that to me,
that's a win.
It felt good. And I realized this is what helping people do the tech writing thing can be my career at the next stage.
John, do you see yourself as a mentor? And that may be the wrong question, but before Colin came on as a contractor at Atlassian, did you see yourself as someone who could fill that role as a mentor for a prospective tech writer? Were there any personal obstacles that you ever overcome to see yourself as someone who could fill this role? What were those early stages like in those first few days working with Colin as, his mentor within this organization?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I had never considered myself management material, if only because I kind of have a 40-hour hard stop. A lot of times managers are expected to put into after-hours work, and I've got kids I'm raising and a very active kind of social life, and I like to play sports. And so I don't want to put in the kind of 60 hours a week I envision managers doing. So right away, I kind of took that off the table. But with this experience with Colin, and I got such good positive feedback around our relationship and our output, that I started to dig a little deeper. Now, where I was fortunate is that because part of the story is that I was disgruntled before Colin, and that I had too much work to do, and they just taken the other technical writer from my team and added her to another team. And so my boss was very sympathetic, but told me a headcount is what it is, and we're trying to make it work. And he says, but what you should do is make sure that you're prepared so that if I do manage to scratch together some resources, that you should be prepared to give them work, because he's kind of far removed at that point from the day-to-day stuff, and that's kind of my responsibility. So I started pretending like I already had someone to mentor, even before Colin joined my team, or even before I knew I would get another team member. And that work was it's a little tedious, and it's like overhead. Creating JIRA tickets for myself is kind of weird, and sometimes commenting on tickets that no one else is looking at but me. It's kind of awkward. It was fantastic. It worked out like a charm, though, because when Colin joined, he had all this context there that I didn't have to speak to him. I didn't have to show
Yes.
him where the information was because I was very diligent about doing my own internal documentation. So, just faking it until I made it
Yeah.
really paid all kinds of dividends in being prepared for that when that opportunity came, that I was ready for it.
And you can probably back me up on this. For listeners who are maybe in a managerial role with a technical writing team, but maybe don't maybe see themselves as a prospective mentor, I bet just that authenticity shows. Like this was your first time being a mentor to a tech writer. Of course, like you said, it was a little awkward at first, the methodology that you chose.
Mm-hmm.
But I bet regardless,
Mm-hmm.
Colin resonated with your willingness and your passion just to help him through this process to become a contributing tech writer at Atlassian. Was that the case even without maybe this checklist of all the perfect things that the mentor has to do? That authenticity and willingness to fill that role, did that resonate with Colin?
Oh, me and Colin now are besties. I
Awesome.
mean, the good thing is that it was easy for him and I to get along because we both have some similar interests in sports, and we were kind of journeyman technical writers for a long time, so we already kind of hit it off personality wise. So that was a great stepping stone. Is that we had a personal relationship that wasn't just
Yeah,
focused on work. I think that's important when you're building a team. Is that you have to know who you're working with, even if you don't want to hang out outside of work. You should know what motivates them and what they care about. But then I took it a step further though, in that I didn't just want to know about Colin. I wanted to know about what he was good at, what he's already done. Because as a contractor, sometimes you get put in a hole about what the responsibilities they'll give you or the decisions you get to make. And so I never treated Colin like a contractor. I always treated him like a member of the team, and I gave him work that mattered, and I asked him to make decisions, and that was from the jump. And I told him that
wow.
this is not going to be like the other roles because he'd already been a contractor at Atlassian for well over a year at that point. He worked on a bunch of different teams, so the guy already knew his way around the Atlassian stack. It was
Yeah.
really giving him, unleashing his potential by giving him, meaningful work to do. And all I did really with that, Jacob, was making sure that I treated Colin the way I always hoped to be treated when I was a contractor. Because I spent the first 8, 9 years of my career as a contractor. I had a different job every year of my career for the first 9 years, and that was mostly by necessity. A lot of times I jumped ship for a better rate or a better opportunity, but most times it wasn't of my own decision.
Sure.
So I always wanted to be treated as a professional, whether I was a contractor or a regular full-time employee. And so I just treated Colin the way I expected to be treated, and he openly was appreciative of that and would tell people about it. That John gave me work that mattered. And
Awesome.
before that, he had not really considered being a regular full-time employee here at Atlassian. But I said, you can cut it here, and I'll vouch for you if this is what you want. And so we kind of made
Yes.
an agreement that I'll go to bat for him, and he can be my champion, and I'll be his. And so we scratched each other's back, and now I'm stuck with the guy. He got a regular full-time. Position. We made an offer to him about 3 weeks ago, and on my encouragement, he took a couple of weeks vacation before he
Yeah.
started. He was a contractor for 10 years before that. So listen, take a paid
Wow.
vacation, and when you come back all refreshed, we'll get started. But of course,
Yeah.
it meant that I had to cover Colin's shift while he was gone. I immediately regretted the decision and was sending him text messages telling him as such. But of course, always in jest, always in jest.
Are y'all catching club soccer games together? Did y'all catch a Champions League game?
Yes, we did actually. It was actually
Fun.
it was like our first little opportunity to hang out outside of work. We went
Good.
to a Liverpool pub because he's a big Liverpool supporter. So we went to a Liverpool pub, and even though the game wasn't so exciting, we were there for the opening goal. We had a great time. So we,
Nice.
we hang out. We hang out a bunch now. Mostly watching soccer.
Yeah, very good. John, I want to fast forward to your work with Deb. So, unlike Colin, Deb came from a field completely unrelated technical communication, something she was a
Mm-hmm.
news reporter.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of questions are people who are interested in TechCom but really have no idea about the field? What kind of questions are they asking their mentors? What do they want to learn about this field?
So Deborah was the first of a handful of folks who I'm actively mentoring. So I started finding some patterns about the things that they care about the most. And there's usually a decision point where they've committed to wanting to do tech writing, and it's a decision that everyone has to make for themselves because it does require some sacrifice. And sacrifice mostly because you might end up having to leave a job for a job that's less secure, or you might have to
Yeah.
go to some training, or you kind of have to admit that you're becoming a novice again, and that's not easy for established
That's
professionals.
hard. Yeah, that's a great
I,
point.
I was fortunate that Deborah was already pretty advanced in her exploration, and she pretty much was convinced this was the right track for her. But she was still a bit on the fence because she had, she's an established professional, and plus, she's like me, like myself. She's a working parent. She's got people to feed,
Yeah.
so it's a risk that the stakes are high. So what Deborah wanted to know, basically, she wanted a real talk about the money involved. How much, what are the salary expectations for tech writers? And then something she hadn't considered is that, and what I like to start with once you've decided that tech writing is for you, is what kind of technical writer do you want to be?
Mm.
That's an interesting decision that most people don't think about if you're not like you or I and kind of had this deep career exploration at the collegiate level. Most people who are transitioning don't really. It's not very clear that there's
Sure.
different kinds of tech writing. So I usually break it down to the first decision you want to make is trying to pick a type of technical writer you want to aim for. And I don't ever want to put you in a box, but it's nice to have a specialization because it makes you a little more valuable and it kind of helps you target the kind of training you want to do.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that most people who are trying to figure out once, what kind of technical writer do they want to be, is understand the different types. And I break it down to the three modern types of software-based technical writing. All those caveats are because I'm not focusing on the more traditional defense type Word, Microsoft Word document, PDF document type roles.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been covered in enough blog posts where that it's pretty apparent. You can Google your way out of that. But
Yeah.
there's three main types the way I see it. There's UX writing, which is like focusing on the copy inside an application, the words inside an app or website. Not marketing copy, but it is the same type of copy. It's mostly about the words that users use to work inside an application. And then, of course, there's developer documentation, things like APIs, things like SDKs that usually engineers have traditionally been responsible for writing, but that there's such a high volume of it that technical writers in this specialization can really make a killing in this field. It's probably the highest paying type of technical writing and the most in demand. And then there's that more traditional software type technical writing where you may be writing in some single sourcing authoring tool. You may be doing DITA. You may be writing in a wiki. It's got a lot of variability. It's kind of the more, it's what most people do when they're software based technical writer. So once you pick one of those three specializations, and the third kind is not really specialization, but it's more what you call yourself and the type of roles you pursue. But picking one of those three, and usually specializing in one of the first two, is where I try to push people. It's a little more risky. There's not as much formal training around those two things. But I think, in my opinion, they're much more lucrative, and they're actually more interesting than just regular technical writing.
And John, I imagine this goes back to one of the conversations you had with Colin, and that was, what are you good at? Like, what are you even interested in relation to writing? Like, I imagine maybe Dev, she appreciated their narrative. You're like, okay, that's awesome. I can imagine your skills translating well to marketing copy. However, I'm going to give you all these other choices and potential paths you can take as well. And I imagine just being aware of all the different options they could pursue was really encouraging for someone who may be overwhelmed of pursuing a brand new field.
Oh, it was for Deborah as a champion. I mean, she took to. I thought the UX writing and the kind of copywriting would be what she would be most interested in, but she actually took a liking to the API documentation and developer documentation.
Cool.
And she has since, I follow her GitHub profile for her her portfolio, and I see her updates, and she's a champion, a static site generator, and she is just. She's gone so far completely on her own, and just with me kind of pointing out interesting things to go to. She's done a bunch of workshops, and she's found that she gets a lot of enjoyment from it, and she's gotten a lot more attention from recruiters because of it.
Cool.
Now, Colin was he did some magazine writing for a little while and was an English teacher. So his grammar is on point. He's my go-to guy for grammar rules, and he takes a shining to UX writing like nobody's business. So he's in every sparring meeting. He's reviewing mock-ups, and so it's fat. But we work on a developer tool, so it's like you'd think that he'd want to do more towards the dev side, and he does have interest in it. But his natural abilities with grammar and with rapport with the rest of the team, he lends himself to being a champion UX writer. Even though we're responsible for much more than just the copy. So it's fascinating to see how it's kind of developed organically for those two examples.
Shout out to Deb and Colin.
Yeah. And so I didn't even tell them that I'd be talking about this, but I'm sure they'll be pleased.
I love it. John, final question for you. We have a lot of students and recent graduates that listen to the Not Boring Tech Writer podcast who'd I'd imagine would love to have a mentor in their lives. They're probably online reading, the great work at Write the Docs and Tom Johnson's blog, I'd Rather Be Writing. A lot of great resources out there, but they're looking to have perhaps that more meaningful one-on-one connection. For the mentees that are looking to find that tech writing mentor in their life, how would you recommend they, I don't know the right phrase for it, go about it or present themselves as an eager mentee willing to learn more about this industry?
So there are two biggest tips for that. The first is get in contact with me directly. If obviously I've taken on a handful of folks already as mentees. So my plate will be full soon. But that's not to say that there's not still advice I can give or pointing you in the right direction to someone else who might be looking for some mentees. But so the first piece of advice is get connected online. So social media is a powerful tool for lots of things, and for professional development is no different. So Twitter is huge. If you don't have the stomach for Twitter, there's lots of other Facebook groups. I think they're much less useful. But get really deep into the Twitter hole. There's lots of great hashtags on technical writing and content design and UX writing. But if worst comes to worst, I say find me on Twitter, and I'm super on brand. I do mix in a little bit of sports talk with my tech writing, a little bit of politics here and there, but I try to keep it very focused on technical writing, diversity in tech, and kind of tech writing type topics, things that are related to writing. So I say get in contact with me online, and I'm following a lot of great people as well. So I'm the Tech Writer Ninja on Twitter. So at Tech Writer Ninja. And if you're starting and this is your first day on Twitter, and I can give you a couple of shout outs and have a couple of big people retweet for you and get you some followers.
That's awesome, John. And you're exactly right. Twitter is huge. I mean, that's how I got my very first tech writing internship. It was my senior year at university, and I'd followed this company that I loved called Copyblogger. And I followed the entire C-suite. And the CEO tweeted, like, looking for an intern in Dallas. And at this point, I thought Copyblogger was an all-remote company. So I was like, what? Like, you actually have an office? You're looking for an internship nearby? And I tweeted back. I said, hey, like, I would love to learn more about this. And that ended up being my very first employer. So a lot of great opportunities that can happen through Twitter.
What a great testament. That's fantastic. That is awesome. That's like exhibit A for the power of media. Yeah. So the first tip was get connected on social media, find a community. The second is get your face out there into the community as well. Things like meetups, Write the Doc meetups are always a lot of fun. Yes. They're my favorite. STC meetups are a lot of fun as well. Make sure you find a chapter that's close, because there's lots of chapters, and if you live in the Bay or any big metropolitan area, there's usually a couple of chapters for Write the Docs and STC. Find the one that's close to you so you don't have to slog it across the city. But get your face out there. Make yourself some business cards. Let them see your face. Ask dumb questions, and then put yourself out there. It's just like social media. It's where you'll find opportunities. It's where Deborah and I got connected. It was at a meetup, and the couple of people who I'm mentoring actually connected me through Deborah. So there's all these different networks that you need to be building. It's the most important thing when you're just starting out, is build that network.
And in the meantime, while you're waiting for the next meetup, join the Write the Doc Slack channel. It's been a while since I've jumped in there, but knowing those guys, I imagine there's a really good dialogue happening in tech writing. And as always, like John said, ask dumb questions, like whatever you're interested in, however you're trying to get into this field, let people know. And I imagine you're going to find a few champions just like John here willing to help you out.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, John, thank you so much. This has been an absolute joy. If anyone wants to connect with you, learn more about all the great work you're doing, where can people connect with you online?
Yeah, so Tech Writer Ninja on Twitter is probably the fastest, but I'm always happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn. A very open, liberal policy. I'll connect with just about anybody. So John A. Paz, P-A-Z is how you spell my last name, and reach out and say hey, and if I can help you out, I'll always give it a shot.
Awesome, John. Thank you. This has been fun. We'll chat very soon.
Thanks a lot, Jacob. Have a good one.
Thanks, John. Thanks again to Knowledge Owl, creators of the wonderful knowledge-based software, for sponsoring the Not Boring Tech Writer podcast. And thanks so much to each of you for listening to this episode. Talk soon.